Shooting it raw?
Yes. Shooting it raw.
I sent you the 4 photographs to discuss, and I'm wondering if you have seen them or you'll only open them when we start.
I only open them when we start, so I haven't looked at them.
Oh,
so do you want
it
to
could be
start?
naked women.
It's up to you. Hopefully.
God, I hope I sent the right ones. Okay.
Okay, look, let's just get into it. So you want to just so you're on the podcast on you're the 17th episode. So that was like a few years ago actually. And so right now, look, we've known, I've known you pretty much all my life almost. And you want to just jump in?
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
Okay, so just a second. I have to go tell my dog to shut the fuck up.
That's okay.
Ralph Chemtov, welcome to the podcast. Usually the each episode starts with me asking my guest, what does photography mean to you? So, you've been doing photographs for a long time. I mean, you're basically the one who got me into photography. So let's just dive into the first photo. So, okay, so the reason why I'll just explain to the listeners, like the reason why I kind of reached out to you is because I'm trying to find people who have a connection to Israel, because what happened on the 7th of October was just mind-blowingly insane. And for some people, talking about their experience can help process. That was what happened in my case with the tsunami in 2004. But yeah, so I was shocked to find out that you were in Tel Aviv back then. And so I was like, what? And so yeah, which is why I reached out to you. And the podcast is about uplifting and helping people and whatever, but this is real life, and it's crazy. And so here's a photo. It's a photo. It's probably shot in the morning. It looks like morning light. Guy leaning on an army jeep that looks quite open. So the guy is Israeli military. I have to just describe it to the photo. So the jeep is face on. The guy is leaning on his arm, looking at you, photographing. There's the number 40180, I guess. It's a kind of license plate. There's a Israeli flag. It looks kind of that's seen cleaner days. Maybe it is clean, but it's because the light makes it looks kind of maybe a little bit dirty. The ground is kind of like packed earth, so you can see Jeep marks. It's like Jeep tire tread. I've never seen this kind of vehicle before. It's a military. It's quite open, so there's no. If it is a military vehicle, like that'd be like way exposed. Yeah, it looks full on. What is this photo? It's called Lucas, Israeli soldier from Argentina.
Right. So let me set it up for you. This is actually, it's a Humvee, so it is an army vehicle. Many variations of them. I saw many variations, open, closed. This gentleman that I met, let me situate where we are, okay, for our listeners. This is actually about 5 kilometers. This would be 5 kilometers east of Gaza. So what happened was, if we just take a step back, I was in Israel when this happened, when the war started. I had an opportunity through my cousin's husband to jump on into his vehicle with a bunch of buddies of his to get down near the Gaza border and to do a little bit of humanitarian, to help the soldiers, to volunteer to help the soldiers, to feed them And this was actually an area that the soldiers frequented as they rotated, uh, in and out of the border with Gaza. So this was on a Shabbat. We arrived around 3 or 4 p.m. This is in the afternoon. It's a backlit shot, and the sun is coming down a little bit, and we're in the shade here. And this is one of the first guys I walked over to, and I wanted to get an idea of what his story was. I explained that I am from Canada, though I am Israeli, and I was there to do my little thing to help, in the contribution in getting the story out of what volunteers were doing in Israel. So this is a humanitarian thing. These are volunteers that go out to these areas and actually cook for the soldiers. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they rotate in and out, and it's actually quite interesting because everything is volunteer. It has nothing to do with the actual IDF, the army. It is people just that just pile into a car, show up, and start cooking. And of course, I can't show the whole album here, but you would see that this is what's going on. Now, I did not help in the actual cooking. I was walking around my cameras, and that's what I like to do, get the story out. So I started talking to Lucas, and he told me that yes, he was in the army, he came from Argentina, and he was doing his thing to help Israel. So he
Mm.
was right on the on the border in Gaza. That's where he was stationed, and this is
Mm.
how we met.
Is it sensitive to show his face?
So I did ask at every occasion. I spoke to dozens of different soldiers. I got many stories out of them. Certain ones were actually had their faces covered, and I approached them and I asked them, and they said they were special forces and they could not be photographed.
Mm-hmm.
The others I asked on an individual basis if they minded. I explained where I was from, and I explained these photographs were first and foremost for them. So I would send them the whole album
Mm-hmm.
once complete. And I
Right.
have, and they've shared it dozens of times already.
Okay.
So that's how I get into this. I explain who I am, what I'm doing, and I want to tell the story.
Okay. Now you listen, I talked about this in the previous episode. I also, talk about how, your photography, your approach, your whole thing with the cameras was what inspired me to pick up a camera back in the day. And yeah, you've absolutely helped inform and everything. How is it that I mean, you just happened to be in Israel? It just happened to be there on vacation, I guess, or visiting family.
Yes. I was there. You know what? I went this year. I went last year as well, and previous to that, it had been 4 or 5 years. But I really want to make it an annual thing. I do have
Hmm.
cousins live out there. I don't have any more aunts and uncles, unfortunately, but I do have a whole bunch of cousins I'm extremely close to. And
Hmm.
even though sometimes the years separate us, we when we get together, it's like we were never separated.
Family,
So
yeah,
it's a really close family. I mean, I never want to lose them. I make the effort. I want to be there with them. And you know what? At first, I was gonna visit the protests that were going on against Netanyahu,
yeah. Hmm.
and I did get one opportunity to do that. But 1 week later, the war started, and what's one to do? Hunker down, visit the bomb shelters many times,
So
along with. Go ahead.
where were you? Where were you when, like, you were in Tel Aviv? Where were you when it first broke?
So I was just south of Tel Aviv in an area called Ber Yaakov, which is a suburb. It's actually, from where I was, line of sight to Ashkelon. So there were evenings where you can look out towards Ashkelon, which is just north of Gaza, and you could see you could see rocket fire.
Well, wow.
Look like fireworks from a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And this
Mm-hmm.
happened. I had helped my cousin move to a new house on the Friday evening, and this happened on the Saturday morning.
Yeah.
So
Wow.
not a good omen, but
Well, if you, yeah. Yeah, so I mean, take us back, like in terms of, okay, so me reaching out to you and to other people to sort of talk about, to share, what's it like to be in your body and see these things through your eyes. I reached out in order to give a kind of platform, and because when I was in Sri Lanka, when the tsunami happened, and when you're in it and you can't process because you don't really have a frame of reference, you don't quite know what to think, don't know, it's just everything is kind of unfolding. Talking about it in some ways can heal, can help. And so if you go back to that moment where at first you have that confusion, right? You're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, what the hell is this? Can you do that now? Like, can you go back to that moment of confusion? Because I think the whole country is like, what the hell is going on here, right? Like everybody's kind of must be looking at each other like, okay, just that shock, right? So can you talk about that?
yeah, I guess in retrospect, this is like your worst nightmare. It's man-made. It's not like your tsunami. We were woken by the house shaking, literally, because the first explosions or the first missiles or rockets actually occurred around 6:30 in the morning. So my cousin and I were asleep, but the house shook, and
Mm,
we understood that it's not the rockets that are landing in Israel that caused these booms and this violent shaking. Rather, it's the intercepting missiles that strike the rockets
right.
that cause the most noise. And it felt like it was right over our head. I actually thought it was an earthquake
Mm,
because years ago I did experience an earthquake in Israel with the same cousin, and I mean the building shook, and this was the exact same thing. The house shook,
mm-hmm,
and the boom was so loud. I mean, literally, I thought it was over our heads.
mm-hmm,
Of course, we ran down to the bomb shelter. Um, Having just moved in, there wasn't anything in the bomb shelter, not even a chair.
mm-hmm.
Okay, there
Yeah.
was nothing in it. And then, you know, on consequent times, we started stocking up the bomb shelter because in that first day, we entered that bomb shelter 12 times. That's how
Mm-hmm.
many rockets came down on the first day.
Okay.
So the sirens go off, and that's kind of eerie when the sirens go off. We're not used to this in
Mm-hmm.
in where we live,
Montreal.
obviously.
Montreal.
No, Montreal or anywhere in North America, and probably not in Hong Kong either. But the sirens go off, and you immediately run, and you run to the shelter,
Mm-hmm.
and you lock yourself in there, and you wait 10 minutes, and that's what you're supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
If there isn't another siren, you come out. And this
Mm.
went on over and over again. In the first few hours, it was back and forth into the shelter.
Wow.
Um, you know, it you know, I, I can't say I was afraid. I have a lot of confidence in the IDF. Okay. I think the worst was to find out what happened afterwards when we turned on the TV to hear of
Yeah.
and to see the massacre that took place that started this whole thing. And that
Yeah.
was that was really shocking. The bombing,
Yeah.
I've heard before, but the visuals were like too much.
Yeah. How soon did you kind of say, okay, I'm going to volunteer. I'm going to get down to 5 or 8 kilometers, you said, from the border, and then ended up photographing this guy, Lucas, leaning on the Humvee, just cooking for soldiers. Like, what was the gap of time between that and when you kind of ended up, down there?
Right. So the attack occurred on the 7th of October. In fact, I mean, this happened 1 week later. Okay. So normally on that Saturday night, what was typical for a vast majority of Israelis, their outing on a Saturday night was going to the protests in downtown
Mm-hmm.
Tel Aviv, where you'd have tens of thousands of people that would protest. And I did that the week before, and I was looking forward to doing it again. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
because there was such a unity that formed at these protests. It brought people together like I've never seen. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what happened in this case was no, we were all in shock. I did not hear of this type of humanitarian voluntary thing. I had to find out later. But on the Monday itself, so this happened on Saturday, on the Monday itself, they started doing, they started opening donation centers everywhere in
Mm-hmm.
Israel. And the army was asking for specific things that people could donate in order to bring to the soldiers and also to supply a lot of the people that were, I guess, unearthed from their living conditions near the border. And so what happened was I went to the Tel Aviv Donation Center, where that was my real first experience to try to help in any way I could. And I
Mm-hmm.
went with a cousin who brought many items, many food items, maybe many articles that she had gathered from a lot of neighbors and I'd shopped for as well. And we showed up on the Monday, and I was surprised to see. I'm telling you, Ran, it was probably 1,000 volunteers in this huge complex, and the cars were streaming in, and people were bringing in bags and boxes of everything. Okay, from
Sure.
food items to clothing to diapers to toiletry items, whatever was
Mm-hmm.
requested. It was they were so overwhelmed. We stayed there for hours. Of course, I just took photographs. I'm,
Mm-hmm.
I'm too old to do anything else. So at this point, so
Mm-hmm.
I take the photographs and I talk to people. And they were so overwhelmed with the response that at one point they had to stop everything, get everybody out so they could
Mm-hmm.
reorganize themselves. There was just too much stuff coming in. That was
Sure.
my first experience, okay, in trying to help, trying to understand what people were doing. The unity again, once again, was phenomenal. People from all political ways
Well,
were coming together. Okay, you had the extreme left working with the extreme right. I mean, it didn't matter where you came from; they just brought everything that was requested in mass. So that was really the first experience. I mean, during that week, there were many rockets fired. I believe in the first week alone, they mentioned something like five or 7,000 rockets had been fired
yeah.
from Hamas.
Yeah.
Uh, Several did make it through, did land in Israel, did cause damage. But in most cases, the Iron Dome, is supposed to be good for about 95% effectiveness. So
Sure.
it did most of the work. But in the interim, I mean, you end up glued to the television, and that's what most
Yeah.
Israelis did. Just glued. It's something like 9/11. When nine
Mm-hmm.
eleven happened, all we did was sit in front of the TV and try to absorb it.
Yep.
And like, is this really real? I mean, is this
Yeah.
really real, or will I wake up? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
because some of the photographs that I witnessed, not only on television, they have to be careful what they showed, but while I was at this particular near the Gaza border, many of the soldiers that I spoke with had seen the massacre with their own eyes.
Oh, fuck.
Um, they were combing the areas looking for terrorists that might have hidden in places, and they had captured their own photographs
Mm.
on their phones, and many of them showed me some of the graphic photographs that they had taken. And wow, I think those are burned into my mind right now. I
Hmm.
can't even I can't even let that go. But the point of my taking the photographs at this particular thing was that I just wanted to show the humanitarian side of it. Okay,
Right.
you know how everyone gets together and how everyone helps each other, and you know that really helps the morale of soldiers as
Hmm.
well as the people in Israel itself. You know, just the coming together as one
Hmm.
country, one unit, even though many political issues, but let's put them aside for now and let's work together to get this done.
I know in terms of like what happened to me, where it's so much bigger and you're just like overwhelmed. Like in a way, how I articulated it was to say, you know, language failed. It's like it comes to a point where there are no words, no, like for me at least, there was no, because it was just like, how do I process, right? And in a way, we use language to make sense of what we see and what we do. And I feel like the people who can hide from the imagery it's easier for people who can hide from seeing the brutality and the awfulness. Obviously for Israelis, or the victims in Israel, and now it's going to be like the victims that there are now happening in Gaza. It's kind of like it's easy to talk when you haven't seen, but then sometimes when you see, it's kind of like language fails.
Well, yeah, okay. Of course, I'm only seeing one side. Um,
Yeah.
you know, it's the beginning of the war. At this point, when I'm at this with the soldiers, we haven't really entered Gaza. We're only securing the
Mm,
border,
right.
and we're trying to flush out
The terrorists.
any terrorists that may still be in Israel, because
Hmm.
you know we learn later on that in fact, you know, it wasn't a few dozen people that came in. It
Yeah.
was upwards of, who knows, hundreds and hundreds of them, obviously,
Yep.
that scaled the fence and made it into the country. And you know, now you've got the task of trying to figure out with cameras and whatever how many actually came through. And
Right.
you know, unfortunately, many witnesses were massacred. Those stories will never be told, and it's very sad. And it's something that Israel has never experienced, not in any war previous to this,
Hmm.
and not since, well, maybe the war of 73 was a very bad war, and before that it was the Holocaust. But
Yeah.
it was so brutal, it's so brutal that it's kind of hard to digest.
Yeah.
It's very hard to digest because they basically went after any civilian of any age, of any gender, whether it's a child, a baby. Uh,
Yeah.
it's just it's hard to
So
fathom
fucked up.
that
So fucked up.
humans can actually do this. And the
Hmm.
numbers, you know, at first the numbers were okay, a couple hundred, but then you know it eventually rose to over 1,400. I mean, that's a
Yeah.
huge number.
Yeah.
That's so very, very. I mean, I obviously. I spend a lot of my days just following day to day what is going on. And I understand that there's a lot of casualties right now on the other side. I don't blame Palestinians. The war is very clear. It's Israel against Hamas. It
Yeah,
is not
exactly.
Israel against Gaza. It is not Israel against Palestinians. It's very, very clear uh, as to what the message is. And unfortunately, in war, you get casualties. We have them on the
Hmm.
Israeli side, and now there are casualties on the side of Gaza. But
Hmm.
let's be frank. I mean, Israel does every precaution in alerting and trying to move people out, whereas their government, Hamas, does the opposite. They
Yep.
invite them to stay and suffer with them.
So in the photo, it's called A Prayer for the Soldiers. It's basically shot from overhead, and we see some people in military fatigues. Most people are. See a couple of people holding rifles, but on the table there are a couple of a couple of bottles of wine. There's a talit. There's the skull cap, the kippah. What is it? It's basically a shot downward of, I think a guy's holding up a cup of wine, probably giving a prayer. There's like a kind of tray with candles. The light is coming from overhead. Hard to know. It could be daylight because there's everybody's standing on what could be grass or could be, yeah, it looks like grass, I guess. So what's this?
Okay, so okay, just to give you a synopsis, the light is actually from generated. There's a generator running, and there's floodlights. This is already
Okay,
dark at this point.
right.
Okay, so there's more and more soldiers coming in at this point. It's the end of the Shabbat, and at this point, I've been accepted. Okay, because I'm
Hmm.
because I'm standing way over these guys, and I want this shot because it's very emotional. Okay, in
Hmm.
the sense that, like, okay, there's a unity, but there's a prayer for the soldiers, for the safety of all the soldiers, for the country. Okay, um, and for those victims that were massacred, as well as the hostages that we know that have been taken by the
Hmm.
terrorists at this point. So, they got the whole table set up. And if you notice, there's a picture, it's hand drawn by a child of the Star
Yeah,
of David
yeah.
that's on the table as well. So all the pieces are there. You have prayer books, you have the kippas, you have the candles, you have the wine, talet, um, you
Hmm.
know, and the soldier is holding a glass of wine, and there is a prayer that is being given, and everyone is comes around to join in on a very sacred moment. And I try to
Hmm.
capture this because like I really felt extremely emotional at this point. Okay,
Hmm.
it's just and the grass you see is actually fake grass, just so you know,
Yeah,
because
yeah, it looks like it.
because
Yeah.
it's all it's all mud underneath, and
Hmm.
and the volunteers have set this place up so they
Hmm.
could cook, so they could feed, and there's dirt floating around everywhere.
Hmm.
So it was very, very emotional, and I am standing above from above. I'm standing on a chair, and
Right.
I think someone was actually holding me so I wouldn't fall, just so I can get this shot, and just to get an idea of what these guys are going through.
Hmm.
They can
Hmm.
use every prayer, because in thinking, I met many soldiers, hundreds of them came that evening, and I kind of wondered, well, how many of these soldiers will not come back in a
Hmm.
week or 2 weeks or 3 weeks? Israel is going to have losses. It is a war, and it's sad. A lot of these
Well, it's,
guys were very, very young. They're active soldiers between the ages of 20, or rather 18 and 21. There
mm-hmm,
were a lot of reservists that did come back, and you can see it in some of the photos. They are older, they're in their 30s, reservists that voluntarily come back.
mm-hmm,
What I heard from many of them was that many reservists were coming back from many countries.
yep,
El Al was flying full planes in to Israel, and these guys were coming in to help. They actually
mm-hmm,
had more people. These are people that were not requested. Okay,
yep,
these are reservists that came back voluntarily to help in any way they could, using the
yeah,
skills that they had. You can see a
mm-hmm,
mix of ages just in this group
yep,
itself. I mean, from very young soldiers to experienced
yep.
ones working together.
Yeah, and I think it's like there's this, it's such a minefield to talk about, and it's so polarizing, and it's so delicate, and I'm sure that when you're there and you're looking at this and you're experiencing it, of course there's the interaction of yourself with these people. These are just people, right? Like these are just everyday people who are it's an existential threat. It's like it's not just this academic like, oh, I have to deal with this. But for them, it's like I think the one face you can really kind of see is this older gentleman who's got his like reading glasses. He's wearing, army fatigues, but he must be at least in his 40s or 50s. And
Yeah, he's actually the one. He's actually the one that was giving out the prayer. So,
okay.
um, okay, so yes, to the young soldiers, to the soldiers that were actually in combat, the threat is real because this is 1 week later, and the threat is very real, not just at the border with Gaza, but of
Mm-hmm.
course, as on the northern border, there were already rocket attacks from Lebanon, Syria, from Hezbollah, and at this point, I'm not sure if rockets were being fired from Yemen, but
Mm-hmm.
that's another front that they have to deal with as well. So at this point, this is 1 week in, and nothing is
Mm-hmm.
contained at this point. It's not where you can kind of put your guard down and say, okay,
Yeah.
fine, we've got this contained. The whole border is secure, and we know that there's nobody in Israel left. So it's not there yet. And
Yeah.
I thought to myself when I was there, first thing first thing I did, my family did not know I was going to be there.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, my family from day one insisted that I leave immediately.
Mm-hmm.
So you can understand that, right? I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I I had no um I I there was no way I was going to leave. First of all, I'm with my family in Israel, and am I just going to abort them? Am I going to abandon them? No,
Yeah.
I didn't feel a personal threat. Okay. So, no, I was going to stay. I had this opportunity that I told no one about except the
Mm-hmm.
cousin that set it up. And I was going to go through this. And to this point, I haven't really mentioned it to anyone.
Mm-hmm.
They'll see it in the video when it comes out. Okay. But yes, being close to the border, I nevertheless felt safe. I'm
Mm-hmm.
surrounded by hundreds of armed guards, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I mean, there's no safer place I could be.
Right. Yeah, it's there. That's a lot. Okay. Wow. Okay. So this is called Soldiers from the Gaza Border at Rest. And so it's let's see, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, about 12 guys just sitting down on this fake turf, I guess. Sitting, it's a weird kind of thing. So you've got the floodlights, And behind them, you've got like the tables, and I guess you've got more soldiers, and you've got like these weird tents, and you've got the lights strewn up. You got the trees in the background. It's at night, it's a night shot. It looks like there's a barbecue going on. You can see cars off in the distance parked. I mean, other than the fact that, I mean, they're at rest, kind of dirty, kind of, you know, just sort of relaxing in army fatigues. You manage to get them all smiling at you, which is really kind of a disconcert, not a disconcerting, but it's a slightly jarring sort of thing because it almost looks like, well, they're relaxed and they're catching their breath, and because they're human, they're like looking at you. Some are holding up like plastic bottles of Coke or whatever it is, drinking. Yeah, so it's a funny juxtaposition of why all these everybody's kind of come together and is so focused, and the reality of their situation, and yet seem to have this sort of emotional break where they're smiling and they're kind of, yeah. So why don't you take us through that?
Okay, so just to give you an idea of the environment. Okay, so yeah, the volunteers have been doing this since day one,
Mm-hmm.
and they bring the fake grass to cover a huge area. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and they set up these covers. Okay, because rain or shine, they need to support the soldiers, to feed them. And what you see in the background, yeah, you see some smoke, and that is from barbecues. Just to give you an idea, okay, of on this particular night, okay, they had at least, I guess, one, two, three, probably eight barbecues running. Some of them are 6 feet and 8 feet long,
Mm-hmm.
and they cooked up 1,100 burgers, okay,
Mm-hmm.
plus whatever else they served. And they had cake, they had ice cream, they had fruit, they had all the drinks they could drink. Okay, they had
Mm-hmm.
everything for the soldiers. Okay, this is all volunteer based. This is all food brought in from people like you and me who just want to help.
Mm-hmm.
This is not subsidized by the IDF or anything. And they set themselves up on a crossroads that is convenient for these guys, or rotating in and out, to come in and take a break and socialize and eat something
Mm-hmm.
good before going back, okay, to the front.
Mm-hmm.
And at this point, this is probably already like 8 o'clock. I've been there many hours already. I've talked to a lot of these guys already. I have other photographs of these guys. They know me already. It's not a problem. I have another photo where the guy with the gun and I switched places. Okay, so that's for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
just to prove that I was there. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this photographer never gets any credit, for anything. So yeah, so they were really friendly. They were nice. They didn't mind having their photos taken, and most of these guys probably already have these photos. So
Right.
at this point, there are I'm guessing probably 3, 4 dozen volunteers. They're all working the kitchen,
Mm-hmm.
slicing the onions, making the salads, preparing the sandwiches. It's like assembly line work, and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing
Mm-hmm.
a phenomenal job. They've got a leader telling them what to do, and those 1,100 hamburgers that came off the grill. It was amazing to see. It was just amazing
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
how much work, and that's one evening. They do this every single day
Mm-hmm.
since the war started. The volunteers
Yep.
keep coming in constantly on rotation just to help the guys out.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys are in a good mood. I mean, look, this is one weekend. Okay, so we got over the shock a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, some of the horror, and now the mood is we're going to be victorious. It's just a
Right.
question of time. We
Yeah.
will win this. It's just a question of time. Okay, the country is not at risk at this point. We are mobilized. We are ready, and we're ready at all the fronts. And
Hmm.
at this point, most of the world is actually with Israel. I mean,
Right.
they are because we put out the videos and the horrid pictures, and the numbers were gruesome. I mean, the
Yeah.
babies and the stories had already come out 1 week later. So
Hmm.
the mood is enthusiastic. The mood is not day one mood. This is like day 7 or 8 at this point.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
It's just to show you that the unity is there, the strength is there, okay, and the morale is there, okay. They're not
Hmm.
eyes drawn and all that stuff. They told me many stories. I have stories. I met a lieutenant who his job was to do DNA sampling, and
Hmm.
he showed me photos on his phone of what the remains of a 12-year-old looks like in a shopping bag. He's the guy that goes and digs up the bones and the blood samples and has to put a face to the DNA sample. He's the guy that looked at the charred bodies and the photos I saw of charred bodies in vehicles,
Hmm.
and the guy that picks up the remains of lifeless babies, etc., etc.
Hmm.
And he's just telling me as if this is what he does.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
just blown away by, wow. And I asked him, how do you sleep at night? How do you sleep at night
hmm.
seeing all this stuff? And of course, he's not a young guy. He's in his 40s. He's been doing this a long time. Just the job. That's what he said, just a
Hmm.
job.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I've spoken to a lot of people who aren't there, a lot of people who are looking from the outside, as I am, right? And in a way, it's how do you it's really it's so hard to even talk about because it's so outside of the normal way of doing things, of living things, which is, one of the reasons why I want to connect with you. And I think one of the reasons why you do street photography and you do this kind of photography is to help people have a
It's in the
sense,
it's yeah, it's in the awareness. It's in the awareness side.
Yeah.
I want
Um,
people to
can,
understand.
yeah. So should we go on to the next photo?
No, I just want to say that I mean I did look forward to possibly doing this again. Again, I kept it under wraps. I didn't tell anybody because they would freak out. I just want to point out that being on site was not as terrible as being
Hmm.
off site. Okay.
Okay.
What they're showing off site actually being there surrounded by other Israelis, family, sort of holding each other up, um, going through the emotion together was actually very soothing. And
Hmm.
I did not feel threatened. I said to myself that I would stay as long as possible. At this point, understand that there were no commercial flights coming in or leaving Israel other than El Al.
Yeah.
Okay, and obviously, I guess the airspace was not under full control. They had issues, safety issues, and I understand that. And I was not going to leave anytime soon. I felt fine. I felt
Hmm.
fine, and I felt like I wanted to understand the story, and I could tell the story being there. But from the outside, my siblings and my parents and my kids and friends were basically telling me that I'm crazy and I need to leave immediately.
Yeah.
I was forced out, and I can tell you that a little later on. Okay.
Hmm.
I do remember it because it's the last one, correct?
Yes, that's right. It's the last one. So this
Okay.
one's called "A Young Couple Mourns the Kidnapped Victims," and
Okay.
it's a photo of, well, first of all, it's a couple. You can't see their face. One guy is his arm is around, this woman's waist. He's got a machine gun strapped over his chest. He looks like he's probably military. He's just wearing sneakers, pants, t-shirt. It's at night, floodlit sort of ground where there's a massive sheet of paper, where other younger guy in his sneakers is leaning down to sign or to write, and lots of people have signed and written stuff on this piece of paper. All around are like Israeli flags. In the background, you could just maybe see like a shopping center or a library or some kind of community center. Some trees a little bit. It's like it looks like the grounds of a public square, maybe. Yeah. So
Good.
yeah, so a young couple
So,
mourns.
okay, so this this is a another experience. This was very, very emotional because in this experience we get to see the faces of each and every hostage victim at this point, okay? And
Mm-hmm.
we know by then that there's over 200. And this is in the center of Tel Aviv by the Museum of Fine Arts. And
Mm-hmm.
this is a big square that people attend to right, I mean, downtown Tel Aviv. So this is actually the next Shabbat, okay? And it's after the Shabbat. And what these people have done, volunteers, is they have made a Shabbat table for the hostages.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you may have seen this. They've done this, I believe, in New York City as well,
Yeah.
following this one. So I don't have a photo of this to show you, but I felt this photo kind of shows an emotional side of what people are going through. Essentially, if you step backwards, you would see a very long table with over 200 seats, including four high chairs, okay, with
Mm-hmm.
hostage written on every seat.
Mm-hmm.
And by the baby chairs, you will see utensils, baby bottles, and bibs. So it really it hits you. It
Mm-hmm.
hits you knowing that there are at least four babies that have been taken hostage. On this particular side, yes, this is obviously it's a soldier that's off on rotation. He's with a girlfriend, possibly. I don't know who these people are, but they're looking down, they're looking sad. And this paper is open for everyone to sign anything they wish,
Mm-hmm.
for best wishes to the hostages and to bring them back home safely, et cetera, et cetera. I just felt that holding a machine gun in civilian clothes was a little odd, but I understand that he's on call and
Mm-hmm.
can be called immediately. And it was
Mm-hmm.
very, I guess I'm not used to it as well, but it was very common to see a lot of civilians carrying arms
For sure.
over those last 2 weeks that I was in Israel, and just pistols in their waistbands or rifles or machine guns. Very common because they just don't know. A terrorist pops out of nowhere, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, uh, I mean, hopefully gets neutralized by one of these people that actually have the skills to do it.
Sure.
So again, you don't feel any. You're not at risk. You don't feel anything that is dangerous at this point. But the whole area was really extremely emotional. It was so quiet you could hear a pin drop.
Mm.
With all the people that were milling about, it was dead quiet. And other than the table, the Shabbat table, there was a wall of photos, and every single one of the hostages had a photo there.
Hmm.
And, now you're putting a face to the missing, which is really, you make a connection. You make, when it's people you don't see or recognize, it's one thing, but when you see the faces, it really hurts. It hurts
Hmm.
because you feel an instant connection. I can tell you that from all my cousins, not one of them, every single one knew someone who knew someone that was murdered.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
And because it's a small community, and they all went to a shiva or a funeral in the
Hmm.
time that I was there. You just knew someone. Um, it
Well, that's
it really
yeah.
brought
So
it
sorry.
close to home.
Yeah. I mean, look, I'm in Hong Kong. I bike out to this faraway cafe, right? I sit in there, and all of a sudden, I meet some guy, and it just so happens I hear his accent, and I'm like, "Oh, where are you from? Are you Dutch or something?" He goes, "Yeah, yeah, something like that." I'm like, "Something like that? Yeah, that's pretty cagey. Come on, where are you from?" And he's like, "Well, he's kind of self-conscious. He's I'm Israeli." I was like, "Oh, okay." So we start speaking, and he had lived for 3 years in one of the kibbutzim, like on the border, that got massacred, and he knows
Well,
people. And it's just like, but it's like, as you say, we're only a degree separated. And my fucking dog is driving me crazy. I'm really sorry about that.
I
Fuck.
don't hear the dog.
Okay, yeah, I do. No, but it's just
Okay.
like I'm gonna leave this in the recording just because, shooting it raw. But yeah, like, but that's the thing I think that people don't like, things that people don't quite understand, right? With people who have these strong opinions about, which to me is bonkers. Like, I'm being in Hong Kong, there's all these like Hong Kongers that I see online or whatever who have an opinion about, and are, the people I see are like, trollish people who have an opinion, like an anti-Israeli opinion, and who are so like so passionate about it, and probably and mean well, but have no connection, have no real understanding. And well, it's like the population of Israel is like the population of Hong Kong. I think it's 9 million, whereas Hong Kong is 7.5 million. But it's like
Yeah, and
you're just
that includes as well. That includes all the Arab Israelis as well. It's
exactly,
not just Jews.
exactly.
There's a
No, no,
full
of
mix in
course.
there.
Yeah, there's like a significant, I mean, a sizable, significant part of the population of Israelis are proud Muslim and proud Christian Israelis, right? And so the people who have this kind of simple opinion about what's happening there with Hamas, it seems so odd. And then it's just 1 degree separated, right? Like that this population is so condensed and it's so tight and has gone through so much. And when I found out that you were there, it was just again 1 degree away.
Yeah, it's you don't obviously you don't plan any of this, okay?
Hmm.
Um, but to live it is quite an experience. I mean, there's no danger on my part. I cannot even to fathom what actually went on. Okay, within the
Hmm.
actual music festival, where so hundreds were killed, or at the kibbutzim, where they the population was almost wiped out. You know,
Hmm.
we cannot fathom this. Okay, I mean, all I wanted to do was to unite with my family. It was an emotional thing. Let's how do we get through it? Because the point is, how
Hmm.
do you get through it now? Like, how does the whole country get through this? It's never happened in this
Hmm.
capacity ever before. How do you do it? And
Hmm.
you know, and imagine with all this, we're getting so much backlash okay, against Israel at this point. It's as if those people that were massacred and those hostages have been forgotten.
Mm-hmm.
Israel won't let you forget. They, I
Sure.
mean, maybe we're not very good at the propaganda, but I think we learned from the Holocaust that you should never forget, and this is
Sure.
something you shouldn't forget. We're at war because it's a man-made thing. The tsunami was an act of God. It just
Mm-hmm.
happens. You can't blame any specific person or party.
Mm-hmm.
But this you can blame.
Yeah.
This is a people that attacked. This could have been avoided. I mean, it could have been avoided
Sure.
if they never attacked. It could have been avoided if we were a little more aware of what was going to happen. It could have been avoided. Yes. But how do you deal with it moving forward?
Mm-hmm.
We're still we're still trying to move forward. We're nowhere, we're not even close yet.
Sure. And just, I mean, in terms of processing, in terms of trying to make sense, in terms of creating a policies or preparation, all this stuff. It's just, but it's just, I mean, it's almost like for me, it's almost intellectually paralyzing. And I know a lot of people like me who are just, and of course we'll make sense of it over time. And I drew a kind of parallel to COVID. So when trying to understand where the virus came from, that essentially paralyzed eventually the world, right? And and it's funny how people have forgotten that, it's like, or it's just like, oh, that's like another age, right? But it's like when COVID started and people were trying to figure out like where did it come from, and it's like, well, okay, it will come out. The science will come out, the stories will come out, and in the true, and in the same way, I think with this, we're going to make sense of it by looking backwards. And sure enough,
Yes, but COVID, we actually wanted to forget COVID. Okay. It ruined
right.
the ones of us that survived it did ruin, it had an effect on our lives. We wanted to
Mm-hmm.
forget. We
Mm-hmm.
lost basically 2.5 years of our lives. Everything was turned upside down. Again, was it man-made or not? We don't really know. Was it an act of God? I mean, was he punishing us for something? We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
This is somewhat more brutal.
Yep.
Um, and and the thing is, no one wants to make you forget, so they're actually putting out these photographs.
Mm-hmm.
They you have to be shocked into believing that this actually happened. It's not a figment of anyone's imagination. You
Yeah.
know, it actually did happen, and people were affected, people died, and families have been destroyed forever,
Yeah.
forever. Okay. Now, when I was there, I mean, I was there. I was there in Israel 2 weeks when it happened, and I ended up staying for 2 more weeks. Okay. I
Mm-hmm.
had a
Mm-hmm.
lot of time to discuss the issues with my family. I had a lot of time to take it in. I had a lot of time to follow it on my own platforms, and then I asked myself, why am I still there? Well, I'm still there because I wanted to, in any way, just help, do something, not
Mm-hmm.
not to run away. I didn't want to run away. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, I was pushed out, not by family, not by a feeling of guilt or anything like that, but the fact that, I was given or sent an email one day prior to departure telling me that this would be the last evacuation, okay, by Canadian Air Force plane
Mm-hmm.
from Israel. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so take it or leave it. And
Right.
and like I had 24 hours to decide basically because it was leaving the
Mm-hmm.
next day. And it was the
Right.
last one. That's it. Canada did made an effort to actually send Air Force jets and to accompany people out of Israel, out of the danger zone, out of the war zone, and to drop them off. I mean, kind of maybe it's a nice thing. Drop them off in Athens. Do
Mm-hmm.
what you will from Athens. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Stay, visit, or just catch another connection and go to Canada. We're going to get you out of the war zone. And, in retrospect, it's a good thing I took the last flight because to today, there are still no flights. So I would,
Hmm.
I would be stuck there,
Hmm.
unable to get out. So,
Right.
that was another experience. Actually, that was the last experience, if you will, getting taken out of a war zone with the aid of the Canadian government. So through a Royal Canadian Air Force jet,
Hmm.
and that was an interesting experience. And I said, well, might as well make the best of it, and I
Hmm.
did. And that's where I leave the story. I left,
Right.
and I stayed in Athens for a while until I could find a proper connection. I visited and
Hmm.
came back, and I can reenact everything I did because having come back to Canada, that's when I start looking at the photographs and I start editing the photographs and I start putting an album together and I start communicating with these people as promised. And
Hmm.
that Lucas fellow did send photos of himself to his mother in Argentina.
Right.
And I received an email from his mother from Argentina thanking me so
Oh.
much for
Hmm.
meeting her son and the photographs that I got of her son back to her. So that was
Hmm.
that was kind of nice. That's kind of nice, and
For
that's the
sure. For sure.
essence of sharing the experience and helping others get through the experience in whichever
Hmm.
little way I can. I just communicate with my cousins constantly to see how they're doing, okay? Because I, 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 I feel like I've abandoned them, okay? And it's
Hmm.
it's it's not a nice feeling, okay? I tell them that you know, with the will of God, I will be there next year, and everything will be normalized, and we can have our reunions as we used to have
Hmm.
before.
Hmm.
Hopefully, nothing terrible happens in the interim.
Yeah. Ah, Ralph. Okay. Look, I don't know if this in any way, hopefully the podcast and how people can see your photos and hopefully connect with, with your experience broadens the messy picture a little bit, the bigger, the total global messy picture of it. And of course, I'm going to keep trying to find other people to share their little window of experience on that. Of course, I'm super happy that, well, A, that you're safe, but also, as I know you, you're a person who uses your camera to make sense of the world. So, I mean, thank you for sharing. I mean, and I'm also just sort of
My pleasure.
processing. Okay, thanks, Ralph.
Thank you. Thank you for the time.
Shooting it raw?
Yes, shooting it raw.